Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musical Mondays. Today, we're going to continue our look at Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which is available for live streaming from the Eugene Symphony. Just go to eugenesymphony.org/watch, and there you can sign up to receive a free password to view the full performance that I did with the Eugene Symphony and violinist Rachel Barton Pine. Last week, we talked a little bit about Vivaldi himself and sort of his history and how he created an incredible music education program at an orphanage in Venice. Today, we're going to look at the idea of the concerto, because these are the Four Seasons concertos. And Vivaldi was really one of the earliest adopters of the idea of a concerto. And so I thought we would take a look at that today because it means so much to these pieces. And also, I love how Vivaldi uses the idea of the concerto to help tell the stories in the Four Seasons. So if you were to ask someone, what is a concerto nowadays? They might tell you, well, it's a piece for one musician, like one special soloist who stands in front of the rest of the orchestra and plays these big, complicated parts, and the rest of the orchestra supports them. And certainly in the past 200 years, when we think of the concerto, we think of this kind of, big showmanship, someone really, playing a big extended part all by themselves, and then they get accompanied and supported by the rest of their orchestra. And there were many famous composers and soloists that helped develop this version of the concerto. But when we talk about the Vivaldi concertos, this is a very early version of a concerto. Now, the word concerto is actually quite fascinating. I was very confused when I went to go study in Italy because concerto in Italian actually is also the word for just a concert. So, if you're giving a concert, you're giving a concerto. And so it took me a while to figure out that it actually kind of has two meanings. There's the concerto, the form of music, but also the word itself can just mean concert. Now, things can be in concert. And when we say that, it means togetherness. It's the idea of coming together. That is the idea of a concert, and that's the idea of a concerto. It's a study in groups, and that's how Vivaldi thought of the concerto. It wasn't just one soloist accompanied by a group of people, but it was the study of two different groups, and the two groups had names. Okay, there was the solo, which means alone, the solo, or the soli, if there were many people in the small group. And then there was the ripieno, the ripieni, if you're going to be plural, the ripieni, which means kind of full or stuffed, which is the larger group of players. Okay, so a concerto in its most basic sense, and the way that Vivaldi looked at it, was the contrast, the study of contrast and how they work together of a small group of musicians and a larger group of musicians. Okay, and we'll see that really beautifully in the Four Seasons. So for our study of soli versus the ripieni in the concertos of Vivaldi, we are going to look at Autumn, the first movement of his Autumn concerto. Now, this movement has so much going on in it and so much contrast between the small group, the soli, and the larger group, the ripieni. Now, the small group consists of obviously the solo violin, because these are violin concertos. So you have the solo violin, but then you also have one cello, and then you'll have the harpsichord, the early version of the piano. So those three instruments usually are the solo group, and maybe you might have one other instrument thrown in, like another violin or maybe a viola, but basically that's your small group, 3 to 4 people. Then your ripieni group is the rest of the orchestra. So you have all your violins, violas, cellos, and basses. That makes up your big group. Now, interestingly, your solo group plays with the ripieni group. Okay, so they kind of stick out, they do their little thing, and then they play with the rest of the group, and then they go back and play solo, and then they go back with the rest of the group. Okay, so that's kind of how the two contrasting parts work in this piece. Now, we're not just going to look at when Vivaldi writes solo and when he writes ripieni parts. We want to look at how Vivaldi tells a story in this movement, because that's what makes it so much better. The first movement of Autumn, it's a party. It's a harvest party. They've harvested all the crops, and all the townspeople get together to celebrate. And there's going to be one particular person represented by the solo violin who is extra excited about partying, and it's that story that this piece is going to tell. So as we listen to the beginning of this concerto, listen to the party scene. So everybody's partying, and then listen for the moment that the soli group starts playing, and it's like one person has just gotten so excited that they go off on kind of their own excitable song and dance, even after the rest of the group has died down. And they do their own thing, and then you'll see right at the very end, the rest of the group decides to join in again for one kind of final hurrah. So check this out at the opening. And later on in the piece, it's kind of like a game starts with our one partier and the group. And so our one partier almost kind of leads a game where the music slows down a little bit in the solo violin, the party solo violin, and then the rest of the group slows down, and then suddenly the partier takes off, and then everyone has to chase, and then slows down again. Everybody has to slow down, and then everybody rushes forward again. And so you could listen how it's almost like kind of follow the leader and copy the leader, and that's kind of how this game works through this whole next section. It's really quite fun how we have the solo group and the ripieni group and how they play this little game together. So the party keeps going and going, and we reach a point where everyone's once again kind of partying in the same way. And then once that finishes, again we hear this our single happy partier take off, and we think maybe they're really going to take off, but they're tired. They've been partying too much, and so after these two outbursts, our partier falls asleep, and we suddenly have this very soft, slow music, and everybody's sleeping, everybody's exhausted from having partied too much. And eventually everybody wakes up and they all start partying again, but you'll have to go hear that for yourself. So now that you've kind of heard me walk you through, and now you know how to listen for the small group and the big group and how they kind of play together, all right, you can go check out the full Eugene Symphony performance, or you can just skip to autumn so you can hear this movement that we've been talking about. Once again, it's just eugenesymphony.org/watch, and you can sign up for a free password and check out the whole incredible performance, and then listen to these little things in it, because it's one of the really fun things about this music is you get to play with a tiny group of people and then a larger group of people, and it's almost like a game between the two groups. And then you can see how this idea of the concerto changed over the centuries, where the smaller group became smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just one person, and the ripieni became the whole full orchestra. And that's how we have today's modern concerto, where there's the soloist in front of the orchestra playing these big virtuosic fancy parts, and they're being accompanied by the rest of the orchestra. But it all started with Vivaldi's conception of the idea of the concerto. So thank you all so much for joining me. As I mentioned last week, Chloe and I are in the process of moving across the country. So we are taking a little bit of break after this video, I think a couple weeks, but then we are going to be back with so much new content for you all. We really look forward to hanging out with you. We're gonna have some special guests on these Musical Mondays. I'll have a piano, so I can do some more things with you all as far as demonstrating things. Chloe and I can play together some more. We got a lot of great things lined up for all of you. So in the meantime, if you've missed any of our videos, we have almost, I think, 10 of them up from all of our previous Musical Mondays. Feel free to go check them out. You can check out some of my recommended listening and some of the other performances that I've turned into watch parties. And you can find all of that on my website. It's lecce-chong.com/FLC at home. And then you can look there and you can see all of the videos, our previous education videos, and so many other things if there's more that you want to look at, until I see you all again for another great Musical Monday. Thanks, everyone.